Yeah. So anyway, so in this case, so there's this run-in with the KKK. They're but they pass them by. No harm comes to them. But it's still an incident that they're like, this is not good down here. That's one of the first sort of triggers. And then at this exact same moment, there's this huge boll weevil infestation of cotton that sweeps across the South. The region that they live in is getting harder and harder to work agriculturally down there. It's just getting more and more difficult to work in these cotton fields. And then and also the word from their several family and friends up in Detroit who had already made this move along with this beginning migration north comes from word from friends that had gone to Detroit and said like, yo, jobs are plentiful. Like, man, there's some great, fantastic jobs up here. And you should consider moving up north. And so Pat Brooks and Lily and a few of the older kids.
And they're a little less horrible to you up here.
Yeah.
Not completely, but
yeah. So anyways, and so the idea was that you don't have to pay rent on your farm. You don't have to do all this stuff. Yeah. And there's just people that just pay you cash and they need workers. They need tons of workers. And so that was like, that was appealing. So Pat Brooks and Lily and some of the older kids went up north to check it out. And while they were there, they all got, they got employed, they found a place to live. And then they sent for Joe and the younger kids Joe was only 12 years old at this point in 1926. They all moved north to follow the rest of the family and they moved to Detroit. So Joe arrives in Detroit when he's 12 years old. And so there's, Joe, there's a great quote. I wanted to mention this book for anybody that, people that are interested in reading about Joe Lewis. There's, quite a few different books I read for these projects, but my favorite, is a book by Richard Bach called, The Great Black Hope. Okay. And so this is, I think it's on the camera here. I can show it here. Yeah. This is the cover for it. So Richard Bach he's actually a Detroit, I've been a fan of Richard, and it's a good chance to mention Richard Bach because I've been reading Richard Bach books since before I was even in college. He's a Detroit historian. And in my opinion, and I'll say it right now, Richard Bach is the dean of Detroit sports historians. As much as I would like to think myself in the category for the books that I've written, as much as I, like my own books, I am a huge fan of Richard Bach's work. And I've read his Ty Cobb book. I've read, several of his books. And he's literally the dean of Detroit historians,
okay.
And so, as much as I said,
is he connected to a school at all, or does he?
I believe Wayne State Press. I don't think he's a professor there. I think he's a fairly independent writer. Okay. But I think Wayne State Press is how he is the books. Just various companies. This one was DeCapo Press in New York, but he's a well-known historian, especially of Detroit subjects. And in his book on Joe Louis, The Great Black Hope, is anybody that's interested in reading about Joe Louis, it's a must read. Yeah. I mean, it's a must read. A lot of the information, especially that I use for Joe Louis's early career, a lot of the stuff we're talking about today, comes out of the story of this, fantastic book that Richard Bach wrote on Joe Louis. And so anyways, I just want to mention that because, because he talks about this quote in here of Joe Louis arriving to Detroit and looking around and saying, of Joe, how what it would have been like for Joe to come from the South, which was totally laid back and sleepy. And, they got to go do they got to do farm work and how everything was real basic. And then he arrives in Detroit, which is at this point a city of 1.5 million people, fourth largest city in the country. It's the super action activity era. Joe would have never seen, even known anything about half the stuff that was there, never seen a trolley, never heard about some of these, now he's in a city of concrete and growing skyscrapers, whereas he came from the city where he was living in a 4-room cabin and sharing a bed with 4 people, living this total agricultural lifestyle. And now he's in this big city and he's in the maw, now, he's living in, in this, just massively busy, congested, exciting city. And, he's only 12 years old when he comes up there. He would have been old enough to know the difference, like a light switch turning on from Alabama to Detroit at this time. He has a great description in there about that. It's, like I say, totally worth reading. So, but a couple of stats, actually, these came right out of Richard Bach's books. I took a couple of notes I took from my own stuff. As I mentioned, 1.5 in 1926, when Joe Louis arrives, 1.5 million people, fourth largest city in the country. 2/3 of the city were foreign born or the children of immigrants. So Detroit is this total melting pot. They're bringing in workers from all over the world to get, because of these, the automotive industry.
Oh yeah.
And Richard Bach has a great point in the book about the automotive industry, about how Detroit was so tied to the auto industry that, like, if there was a sales slump in a single year, it'd be like a miniature depression in Detroit. Like, these people, it would really affect everybody's, income, like, for just any type of things that impact the auto industry, even for a short period of time, would send shockwaves through the whole city.
Yeah, shake this place. Yeah.
So it was just totally, like, it was just up and down. But when things were great, things were fantastic in the city. Everything was booming. And so, he has a great point, sort of pointing that out. So from 1917 to 1925, 10,000. This is what he talks about here too. Is that there was with these there was so many, these companies had such need for people to work in these plants, that it was not uncommon that for, like, when trains pulled up in the station loaded with people that were coming north, like black people coming north, they would literally be taken right off the train and taken right to a job.
Yep.
Like, plugged right into the factory to start working. That's how much need there was. And so he points out, in 1917 to 1925, 10,000 blacks were hired at Ford's River Rouge plant, and were hired into all classes for the same wages as white people were making. So literally there was no, like, they even said, like, so in that 8-year stretch, and he was, there's 10,000 black people were hired at this at Ford's, and they were hired into all job classes. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just like, just the worst of the worst. They were hired into all job classes, and they were, for the same wages as whites. So, from 19, as a consequence, from 1910 to 1920, the black population grew from 5,700 to 41,000. Right. By 1930, which is what we're about to get into, of course, by 1930, the black population, Troy, was 120,000.
Wow.
So again, from 1910 to 1930, 20 years, the black population went from 5,700 to 120,000. Right. So it's a massive surge in, black residents to the city. And it sort of brings up the next sort of point, which is the area that this swelling population of black people coming into the city lived, which was an area in Detroit called Black Bottom.
Yeah.
And so have you ever heard of Black Bottom?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of times people think of Black Bottom because it was like, that's where, it was a 60 square block area on Detroit's east side that is like Black Bottom because that's where black people live.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. It was called Black Bottom prior to this, influx of black residents due to this dark black soil that the French had actually named it Black Bottom. This particular region had this super dark soil, and so it's called Black Bottom. And so it just was, I guess, sort of a coincidence, or maybe, there was other immigrant groups in there, like the Polish lived in the area. It's kind of like how, like, in New York, and that, like, like Chinatown, like these different, Italians lived in this area for a while. First, it was like an Italian, like Little Italy, and then it changed for like Little Poland or whatever. A certain region becomes identified with, like, the immigrant population. You could call it a slum, you could call it whatever, but that's where when the immigrants come in, they're sort of funneled into that same area, and that's what happened in this case here. These people cram into this area, and as a result, the rent explodes on these different houses. Like, he's got a great.
Oh, they're here and they got jobs. Let's charge them more rent.
Exactly, but especially since they're all sort of ghettoized in this one particular area, it just meant that there was not enough housing to go around, and so the rents exploded. And so there's, like, he's got these stories where people are paying money to, like, live in it, like sleep in an outhouse or sleep on a pool table. So it was not particularly, it was not great, especially as they say, highly unsanitary conditions. People are living in incredibly close proximity. And as a result, there was, disease and death were rampant. Ugh. And so in the 1920s, and this is again a point from his book, which is the 1920s, deaths outnumbered births.
Oh,
which is showing you just how
1920s. Okay.
So deaths outnumbered births. There's more people dying in Black Bottom than there was being born.
Was Scarlet Fever around that time?
like all kinds of stuff like, syphilis and some of these, these social diseases that are passed on when people are living in close proximity, just, any type of communicable disease, whether it's not just, STIs or whatever, but, but just, the flu and anything that's transmissible, anything that is contagious is ripping its way through the population and killing large swaths of people. Like I say, especially with, unsanitary condition that, I don't have any specific diseases, but it was, it was unsanitary and led to, more deaths than births in this area. So anyways, so to paint a little bit of a picture of the sort of world that Joe Louis inhabited, there's a fantastic quote from Richard Bach's book on Joe Louis that I wanted to read. I thought it was there's a lot of stuff you could read out of this book. That's what I'm saying. It's highly recommended for anybody that's watching this show that wants to really dive into Joe Louis. It is a tremendous book. I've read it probably 3 times. I mean, it's a fantastic book. I can't recommend it enough. So anyways, I'm going to read this. This is a great quote. This is, again, Richard Bach's book on Joe Louis, The Great Black Hope. So the main avenues of this city within a city were St. Antoine and Hastings, streets that snapped and sizzled as 80,000 more blacks, most of them unattached men, poured into the ghetto during the decade. Legitimate businesses such as the 250-seat Crisis Cafe and Biltmore Hotel coexisted with backroom joints set up to satisfy every kind of urge with booze, jazz, drugs, women, and various games of chance. A newcomer didn't have to look far to find a wide range of experiences. He could go up for a factory job at the Urban League office on St. Antoine, then mosey 3 storefronts over for a cheap filling meal of biscuits and sausage gravy at John Brocher's restaurant. Afterwards, the self-styled Biscuit King could steer the newcomer 50 feet in any direction to one of the 711 disorderly houses the American Social Hygiene Association had uncovered within a 1-mile radius of City Hall. Authorities felt little pressure to eliminate the rampant vice that characterized this strip dubbed Paradise Valley. They were satisfied to contain it and from time to time to sample a taste of it themselves. So before we finish up with the quote, there's a little bit more I want to read. The thing to emphasize here is this strip in the middle of Black Bottom called Paradise Valley. Mm-hmm. Okay. Which is like, it's like the New York, it's like I always picture it as like the strip in Vegas. Okay. Especially in the early years of Vegas, which is like, there's all manner of vice going on. Everything that's what he actually just finished saying. Like it. He's like, there's everything that you can imagine going on in Paradise Valley. Yeah. It's like they're in Paradise Valley, as we're about to finish up reading here, as of, for the rest of this quote, Paradise Valley, it's almost like a metaphor at this point, the world we live in now, and it's really just the human experience, which is the temptation. There right in front of you is this glitzy, glamorous, crazy, fun world, right? Yeah. But if you indulge in it, especially if you indulge in it too much, it's going to be your destruction. And that's what, Joe Louis is growing up right here. Jeez. Right with Paradise Valley, right in his face. And this is and so anyways, this is it's a great little description of what Paradise Valley was like. And of course, like what the temptation would, there was. So the valley was only the flashiest part of a ghetto that was home to every hustle, scam, and temptation under the sun. Certainly things were not always what they appeared to be. Everett Watson's realty office was a front for his numbers racket. Ike Portlock's tailor shop always had a crap game going. Whiskey was being brewed in Dave Winslow's sweet shop. Even local Negro League pitcher Jack Marshall ran a 2-bed brothel. Joe and his stepbrother Pat couldn't stroll down Catherine Street without noticing the best little whorehouses in Detroit, with lay girls sitting demurely in the front windows, ostensibly reading books but really waiting for customers. One person finally recalled. Inside certain other doorways, muggles, marijuana cigarettes, could be purchased for $1 a piece. Someone innocently wandering into the wrong shoe shine parlor risked getting slapped around and tossed out. Didn't the dummy know he was interrupting a round-the-clock poker game? Prohibition, the law of the land from 1920 to 1933, had the effect of making countless citizens into criminals. A visit to a friend's flat might reveal the entire family busily engaged in bootlegging, which in terms of gross revenues was estimated to be the city's second leading industry behind automaking. Mother would be scrubbing bottles, father would be tending his still in the closet, and the children would be packing the hooch, not intended for home use, for delivery to neighborhood clients. Coleman Young, whose family had left Alabama 3 years before Joe's, was one of the many impressionable youths torn between two role models: the hustlers with their flashy clothes and money clips, and the Ford mules, as they were called, straggling home from work, all dirty and sweaty and beat. So this is the temptation.
And this is Joe's life.
This
is
is
what he's faced
exactly
24/7.
He's faced with this 24/7. And so, that's what I'm saying. So this is, so now, it's absolutely worth diving into the story of like sort of who Joe Louis was and how prepared he was to either indulge in this temptation or to, or how he was set up to, defend against it, how he fit into this. And so Joe, he's appeared in a couple different movies, or in Harlem Nights he was in.
Yeah.
What was another movie he was in? But anyways, in every case he's portrayed as in a somewhat of how he was, which was, Joe was, he was a extremely slow developer. I think it says in the book, Richard Bach says that he didn't say his first word till he was 11 months old.
Wow.
He had a speech. As a result, he had a speech impediment. When he moved up to Detroit at 12 years old, they started him off in the 3rd grade, and he never got beyond 6th grade. Even at 16, 17 years old, he's still in 6th grade. He had no, he just, and as because he was not able to, to keep up in class, he just had no, he had no interest in it, or very little interest. And I'm sure the interest was a result of him not, I've been in the situation when I went to the University of Edinburgh. I was in an Italian class that was in the wrong class for me.
Yeah.
I went out there and I was sort of prepared for some of the books, book learning Italian, but they're out there speaking it fluently in the class I'm in, and they're looking at me to say, all these, to communicate with them. And I knew nothing.
Vino.
And it's all you can do is kind of laugh and be like, you're trying not to make an idiot of yourself and trying to make light of the situation. But in reality, you're basically terrified of the teacher calling on you. And that's sort of the situation with Joe, which is that he didn't process information like everybody. He was, as far as academically, he was developmentally, challenged. He never caught up. And so, as a result, he became even more quiet. It was sort of his defense mechanism, was just to try to blend in and stay quiet, not to disrupt anything. And so eventually, in 1930, they decided. So the Great Depression, of course, begins in 1929, and so as a result, Joe, like, it gets to the point where he's needed. They know that the education is not going to be his path forward, and so they're like, well, let's get him into a trade school to see if we, to learn a skill.
Fair enough.
And so woodworking was what he ended up going into. And Joe's only account, saying that he was, I was pretty good at making cabinets, but the money for cabinets was not enough. Like, there was no real, that wasn't helping him put money in his pocket. So really what he ended up doing was, and I got a little fact here just to kind of show how bad the Great Depression, sunk into at this point. In the 1920s, we just got done talking about how, like, people were getting pulled off the train and sent right to work, right into the train station. And, thousands of people were coming north, and, and that there's jobs for everyone. Those cities are painted with gold, laid with gold. But all of a sudden, when the Great Depression hits, auto production drops 70%. And it's it's estimated that 80% of Detroit's black workers were idle. And so now all of a sudden, every work is work. You can charge whatever. If you have money to pay, you can get 10 people to do the same job for a dime or something. It's like, and so the family went on relief. Joe was doing odd jobs. He's there's numerous things he's doing, but a couple of the more famous things he was doing was delivering coal in the winter and delivering ice in the summer. And especially the component of delivering ice. I actually wrote a part in the screenplay about Joe delivering ice, because Joe actually was one of the things that Joe credited from him developing his physique, was that he was just he was delivering, carrying blocks of ice up 3 flights of stairs every day.
He was just a hardworking Joe.
Yeah, there you go. Your puns are right on point, Jamie, as usual.
Yeah. So I don't mean to make light of him, but
but he was. I mean,
he's a hardworking cat.
That's what they say. The Great Depression. This is a brutal era. And for Americans of color, it was even, it was as much, or I mean, it was at least as tough, if not more so.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. So, so Joe is just doing whatever he can just to earn a few coins. Again, there's 16 total people in the family. Many at this point, his older siblings had moved out and were doing their own thing at this point.
Yeah.
And they were also sending money back to the family to try to keep the entire family going. But they're doing whatever they can. Like I say, the family's on relief. They're Joe, they're doing odd jobs. And then, right in the background, you've got this environment, they're looking at Joe. Joe's not a natural leader. Joel's not, again, he hasn't developed, doesn't have any particularly, he's not particularly, intelligent as far as like, I'm going to start my own business and do all these things and provide for my family like this. Yeah. He's just, he's a face amongst the crowd, and at this point, and right across, here's Paradise Valley, with all of its, potential for, den and villainy and stuff. And it's totally worth mentioning the anchor of his family. I haven't even mentioned it. We have a picture of him and his mom. We haven't even mentioned her. And his mother, Lily Reese Barrow, is the absolute anchor of this household.
Right.
So like, of all the negative, of all the, Joe's, we talk about his education, stuff like this. But one of the major things that he had going for him was that Lily Barrow was a religious woman. She was, they went to church every Sunday. It was Sunday school was one of the major things they went to.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's what I love about this book is Richard Beck spends a lot of time, and really every book that you read about Joe Louis always redirects towards his mother. Even the photos of the time show her in numerous photos. And that she's like this God-fearing woman. She's like the matriarch of this family.
She wanted to keep him on the straight and narrow.
Absolutely. And
it's like, I'm going to give you money to go take violin lessons.
Eventually, yes. But like I say, even before that, though, she was the anchor of this entire family.
Yeah.
When his father was,
how many you said 11 siblings?
8. Well, he had 7. He had 7 siblings, but then she married Pat Brooks, who brought 8 other kids into the household. And so, yeah, so, when his father, he's only 2 years old when his biological father goes into the mental asylum,
right.
And she's by herself for 4 years, moving, with 8 kids, taking care of 8 kids by herself. And she's, in the era of sharecropping and moving from farm to farm, and she's keeping the family alive.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, and she's doing it. Dang. And when that's what I love about the Richard Beck book here is he talks about Joe's experiences early on. Joe was like, I mean, for the most part, like they didn't have anything, but just like the fact that the family sort of camaraderie around his mother was what, their spirit was strong. I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's many ways to describe the different characteristics of her, but there was a family, the family was like a unified force.
Yeah.
They worked together, and it was like this religious foundation they had. It was that was the anchor. It was the mother and her anchor and her, that she used for herself and the family was religion. They went to church, they went to Bible school, they studied, that was their anchor. And that was the anchor when they moved to Detroit. That continued to be their anchor. They still went to church. They still went to this. And she basically, whenever there's these temptations were calling, as we'll find out in the next episode.
Yeah.
Whenever these temptations were calling, the lure came back in, which was that religious foundation and their faith in her that, would bring them back in.
This is a good place to break.
Almost, yeah.
All right.
You already mentioned that the violin, and I just wanted that's really the final thing I want to touch on, because so Joe's going through this series of things, trying to figure out how he can benefit the family, and his mother, for whatever reason, had this thought that Joe had a musical aptitude.
Okay.
That maybe there was something about music that he could tap into, and so despite their extreme poverty, she is able to divert a few coins to Joe for these violin lessons.
Nice.
So she's getting Joe into violin lessons. Yeah.
Keeping him off the streets.
Yeah. So
keeping him out of trouble.
Yeah. So she's.
And he takes boxing lessons.
Well, we'll get to that. You don't want to just spoiler alert, Jamie. We just ruined the entire show.
He becomes a violin virtuoso.
Yeah. So
tours the planet.
And then boxing, he picks up boxing in the spare time.
He picks up boxing later.
Yeah.
That's
so we have a picture of the slide on the screen.
I
with Joe.
I do, yeah.
So Joe is going to be posing. This is going to be
Julian Black,
a guy who's a major importance for Joe's career.
Okay,
and he's posing with them at a certain point in the future. And he's got a violin with him because the violin is just such a great little story, component for the rise of Joe Louis in 1934.
So let's get to the violin story next time.
Yeah, well, that's where we're gonna pick up with Joe's, because we didn't really talk about his boxing. This is more of like a little bit of a Joe moving to Detroit, the family background, and and
wrapped
also
up those other boxers.
Yeah, and also and just to show you kind of how far away he was. This is kind of the point that I wanted to make with this entire, spending so much time on the, his just who he was prior to the boxing thing is that at this exact moment, like we just ran through like Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney and Max Schmeling and Primo Carnera and Max Baer and all these different guys.
And then we got this guy.
And then Joe Louis at this point in time, here we are in 1930. Not really 1933, 34 is where we're kind of leaving off. 1933. Joe, he is the furthest guy from having anything to do with a heavyweight championship title.
Yeah.
He's 7th of 8 kids, a part of a family of 16 kids that have come from the Buckaloo Mountains of Alabama.
Wow.
He's not, he doesn't speak well. He's not flamboyant in any degree. He's a face in a crowd of 100 and how many thousand, over 120,000 black people, jammed into Black Bottom, Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit itself was a boxing. They love boxing. Detroit boxing was people, there was boxing matches at Olympia Stadium. Big name boxers would come there every once in a while, but it wasn't like Madison Square Gardens or the biggest boxing place in the world. But there's, what we're trying to show here is that this is a guy. How is he going to get his chance? How does that's why I say this season is so incredible with Joe Louis, is how in the heck does this guy who is just a face in the crowd?
Yeah. How
does this guy, who's got this looming shadow of Jack Johnson? It's not just a shadow. With the shadow is carved a barrier, which is, made the barrier for black champions, for black boxers. How does this guy emerge from this situation to become what we're about to show is the most recognizable athlete on earth in a year?
It's a leap,
really in about 2 years. How does this is one of the most phenomenal rises
we take this
of
leap.
An obscure athlete. I mean, this is like your log cabin to president story. And it doesn't get any bigger. I don't think it'd be possible for somebody to start out more at the bottom with more obstacles facing them.
Right.
I mean, how could you start out with anything with more obstacles against you than what Joe Louis had at this moment in his life?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, that was my hope, is to paint this picture of a guy who was like,
is it luck? Is it determination?
That's what we're going to say.
Propaganda?
I think it's a combination of all these confluences of factors that, like every single thing that possibly needs to go right is going to have to go right in order for him to get this opportunity. And it's not just luck and fluke and all this, his own skill, his own determination, his own everything. It's going to, it wasn't just skill. It wasn't just his ability. It wasn't just the luck of meeting the right person. There's so many factors that have to come into play that when you're done sort of understanding this story, it almost comes to a realization, like to a thought that it was almost like divine fate that it had to happen, that something out like that, like this divine force wanted it to happen. And therefore those confluences events, and that this particular person was tapped in order, this human being was tapped to do what he needed to do. Like almost like he was born to do it.
Wow.
Potentially a child of destiny, and that's what's so fascinating is like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Was Joe Louis put here to be that, or was that, or did he do that because those situations existed? And that's what we're going to get.
We'll
to
see how
that
how that switch gets flipped next week.
There's like I said, it's an evolving story.
Sure.
It's one domino, sort of things. That's why we started with Jack Johnson, to show like one of these major barriers that faced him, which was that boxing was not just a segregated sport. It was, even more so because of this looming shit. So, that's a huge obstacle that he's going to have to overcome. And we'll get to that point when the time comes.
All right. So next week we'll do it again. Detroit City of Champions. Thank you so much for following along. Collect, subscribe.
Yeah. Like the video. Likes really help.
Wherever you're
really
at.
Help. Yeah.
We appreciate it. Thumbs up and comments help along. We appreciate your time, and more with Joe Lewis. I'll try to get his boy JoJo on soon.
Yeah.
Next week might be good for that. So anyway, we'll do that soon. Thanks again. DetroitCityOfChampions.com. Find us on Facebook and all the social medias. And till next time, put them up.